And so WION continues to bring you the latest on US election. Reports are coming in from agencies which suggest that Donald Trump has won the crucial battleground state of Ohio. In 2016, the presidential election, Trump won the state by 8 percentage points. And this is the latest that we're bringing to you, that US President Donald Trump is also winning in South Carolina. Remember, Joe Biden was handed a major victory in South Carolina primary. There are 9 electoral votes at stake in South Carolina. It takes 270 electoral votes to win the 2020 presidential election. In 2016, President Trump carried the state and won the general election. National exit polls are showing the Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden is winning most votes of those who voted for the third party or did not vote at all in 2016. Meanwhile, reports from agencies say that Biden is winning in Colorado as well. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden is also leading in Arizona by a huge margin. Remember, Arizona is a key battleground state which Donald Trump won in 2016 by 4 percentage points. Arizona's 11 electoral votes are a toss-up. The latest CBS News polling before shows Joe Biden up, but within the margin of error. President Trump has stopped in Arizona 7 times this year, with some of his in-person trips to the Grand Canyon state earlier this year billed as official presidential visits amid the coronavirus pandemic. Meanwhile, Mr. Biden made his debut visit to Arizona in early October. In addition, Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar won the re-election to U.S. House in Minnesota's 5th congressional state.
Doing incredibly well in Texas. We're doing, I think.
And let's quickly get in a sense of perspective on all the latest developments on US election. For that, I'm joined in by senior journalist Ray Locker, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. at this hour. A very warm welcome to you, Ray. Now, going by Trump's lead in the crucial battleground states like Ohio, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and even Pennsylvania, what's your hunch? Will the US go red or blue?
Well, I think right now it's still too early to tell what's going to happen in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. A lot of the mail ballots that came in won't be counted until later. So what we're seeing now is the election day voting results, which tend to favor Republicans. And that's something we've all anticipated. And many Democrats were concerned that people would see Trump leading at this stage on election night, and that Trump would somehow declare victory and make it seem that any of the votes that were counted later were somehow illegitimate. But that's not the way it works here. Many elections in the past have been decided days later because it takes a long time to count ballots that come in by mail, come in overseas from military voters, and every state does it differently. So it's confusing to many Americans, you know, and forget about people who don't live here, you know, how this happens. So, you know, we're looking at it right now. It looks good for Trump in a lot of states, but that could change. And I think many people anticipate it will change.
Right. Ray, is it also possible that the poll results might look very different from what they are looking in the beginning, taking into consideration there's been unprecedented early voting and mail-in ballots?
Yes. I mean, the early voting and particularly the mail-in ballots really changed this whole layout this year than before. If we didn't have the COVID-19 pandemic, people probably would have gone to vote on election day in far greater numbers than they did this year. And so we would have a different picture on how the election turned out. But because so many people voted by mail, and many of these states don't have the mechanisms in place to count those ballots very quickly, or they have rules that say those ballots will be counted last, you have a lag in the actual result. And so, you know, that's why a lot of people are on pins and needles right now. They don't know what's going to happen. So each campaign and each major news media outlet in the United States is looking at the various rules in each state to see, you know, how things are going to play out. For example, in Georgia, the president went out to a very significant early lead by about 8 or 9 percentage points. Now people are saying, and the New York Times has a needle on its website that rates, you know, whose has the best chance of winning. And now they have Biden at a 65% chance of winning Georgia. That's because votes from large cities like Atlanta have not all been counted, and they have a lot of outstanding mail-in ballots. So you know that there is a pool of ballots out there that haven't been counted. You look at where they're coming from, and you get a sense of, how did those areas vote earlier, and how do we think things are going to break? That's why when you look at the map and you see that 85 or 90% of the precincts have reported in Georgia, but they haven't called the state, that's because there's a lot of outstanding ballots that remain to be counted.
Right. Also, Ray, do you think that the so-called shy or the silent voter has played a very significant role, especially when it comes to extending support to Donald Trump?
I think in some places that's true. And I think in the reverse, that's true for Biden voters. Look, if you live in a place that the majority of people don't agree with you, you don't run around and trumpet your support for, your candidate. You feel self-conscious. You might be a little bit scared. I mean, I don't think most people are going to hurt you because but you try to downplay your support. So I think there is an element of that. I don't think it's as big as many Trump supporters would have you believe. But yeah, I'm sure it happens in some places.
Right. And just while we speak, Ray, exit poll data is showing that more Latino voters have supported Donald Trump in 2020 than in 2016. But young American voters are favoring Joe Biden. What do you make of this trend?
I think that Donald Trump turned off a lot of young voters. They don't really like basically his demeanor and his stand on a lot of issues. Whereas Latino voters, and they're very different in various parts of the country, but primarily in Florida, where they tend to be Cubans and Venezuelans, I think Trump's attack on Biden and being a socialist really resonated with those people that have come from countries where socialism was an utter disaster, like Cuba and certainly Venezuela. I mean, a lot of people from Venezuela have left there and they live in Florida. And you really need to have worked in Florida for a long time, which I did before I moved to Washington, to understand the various dynamics of that state. It's like 10 different states in one, and a few countries rolled into one as well. And so those two voting blocks, particularly in Southeast Florida, Cuban Americans, Venezuelan Americans, I think broke strongly for the president in this election.
We've spoken about the Cuban Americans and the Venezuelan Americans. Now, also, let's come to the black community. Reports are also suggesting that Donald Trump's support in the black community has not diminished. Does that come as a surprise?
I think there are black male voters who like the president because he says what's on his mind and it's not politically correct. And, I think that was a big part of his appeal in 2016. Americans always say, oh, we want a guy who says what he thinks. And in the crowded primary field in 2016.
Right. We're going to go into maybe tomorrow morning, maybe even longer. But look, we feel good about where we are. We really do. I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. We knew because of the unprecedented early vote and the mail-in vote that it was going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted. But we're feeling good. We're feeling good about where we are. We believe one of the nets has suggested we've already won Arizona, but we're confident about Arizona. That's a turnaround. We also just called it for Minnesota, and we're still in the game in Georgia, although that's not one we expected. And we're feeling real good about Wisconsin and Michigan. And by the way, it's going to take time to count the votes. We're going to win Pennsylvania. Yes. I've been talking to folks in Philly, Allegheny County, Scranton, and they're really encouraged by the turnout and what they see. Look, we could know the results as early as tomorrow morning. but it may take a little longer. As I've said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people. But I'm optimistic about this outcome. And I want to thank every one of you who came out and voted in this election. And by the way, Chris Coons and the Democrats, congratulations here in Delaware. Pardon me? Hey, John, the Gov, yeah, the whole team, man. You've done a great job. I'm grateful to the poll workers, to our volunteers, our canvassers, everyone who participated in this democratic process. And I'm grateful to all of my supporters here in Delaware and all across the nation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And folks, you heard me say it before. Every time I'd walk out of my grandpa's house up in Scranton, he'd yell, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandma, when she was alive, yelled, "No, Joey, spread it. Keep the faith, guys. We're going to win this." Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your patience is great. Let's walk over here.
All right. So Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden addressing his home state, Delaware, where he sounded very confident, of course claimed victory in Arizona, very happy about winning Oregon, New Mexico, also sounding very optimistic about winning Pennsylvania, which is of course a crucial battleground state where Donald Trump had been leading so far. Let's quickly go back to senior journalist Ray Locker, who's joining us on the broadcast right now. Ray, a firearms sales spike and an ammunition shortage, protests, shops being boarded just before election day. That, of course, speaks a lot about the kind of fear in the United States. Do you see this by far as one of the most polarized and divisive elections in U.S. history?
Oh, definitely. I mean, look, a part of it has to do with the nature of President Trump. He doesn't shy away from controversy. Instead of trying to calm things down, he riles things up. You look at some of the things he said on the campaign trail, what he puts out on Twitter. It's all aimed at amplifying his support among the people who like him and not trying to gain support from the people who don't like him or may be on the fence. And it's not enough to gain the majority of votes. He's probably not going to get the majority of votes this election. He didn't last election. But the peculiarities of the U.S. electoral system with the Electoral College can really serve him well in a state that's dominated by white voters. And so that's what you saw in 2016. Mm-hmm. He tried to duplicate that this year. It may work, it may not. But the bottom line is, if he wins this election, he's not going to have the majority of popular votes.
Right. Ray, I'm going to go back to the question I had asked you previously, but Joe Biden made his address, and apologies, we had to cut to that. But let's talk about the black community. It comes as a major surprise when you look at these trends which are being analyzed. If he's not diminished his supporter base in the black community, especially after what America has witnessed when it comes to the issue of racism or even the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right. No, look, the interesting thing about this election is after all of the things that happened this year with the pandemic, with the George Floyd killings and the protests, President Trump has managed to hold on to his support in a lot of areas. You're seeing it diminish among suburban white women, but not necessarily among his support with, from black men and some Hispanic men. They like the way that he carries himself. They like that element of macho. Everybody's different, and no voting group is a complete monolith. So, black voters by and large vote for Democrats, but some of them don't. And when they don't in certain areas, that can help somebody like Trump win. And that's what happened in 2016.
Right. And it seems to be a hotly contested election. Having said that, Ray, how likely is it that this election is going to make it to the U.S. Supreme Court? Do you think it's going to be challenged?
I think there will be some attempts to challenge it. What happened in 2000 when it went to the Supreme Court was that the margin in Florida was so narrow, it fell into the scope of an automatic recount. And then the legal fight over the mechanics of that recount led to the Supreme Court decision. You know, we may not see a margin that thin in any of these states. What we're looking at now is the mechanics of counting ballots. And because we've had such an unprecedented amount of mail-in and absentee ballots, that's what really changes the nature of this. So a court fight would then be how late can we count these ballots? What counts as an eligible ballot? And if the margin is wide enough, there's no reason for it to go to court because there's no recount provision. But it's too early to tell if that's what's going to happen right now. I know that most Americans do not want this thing to go to the Supreme Court. Some because they think that they would lose in that court battle. But really, to have the courts adjudicate an election result, of this magnitude, I think is a sign of weakness on the part of this country and the kind of voting mechanisms that it has. And I don't think many people want that to happen.
Absolutely. Very well said. It is a sign of weakness. Having said that, let's also talk about Indian Americans, considering they garner a lot of curiosity in India itself. There's been a lot of talk about influential Indian Americans campaigning and supporting the Dems. How influential is the Indian American community going to be in this current U.S. election?
Well, I think in some places they're a difference maker. I mean, there's a lot of Indian Americans in Texas. There's some Indian American candidates on the ballot in Texas, one in the Houston area, Sri Kulkarni. And I don't know, the outcome of that race yet, but, they're attracting a lot of attention. They're getting a lot. They're donating a lot of money. I don't know yet if they're the difference maker in any one state, but they're growing in importance, and they're going to continue to grow in importance. This is something that I've talked about often in these programs. The relation transcends what happens in electoral politics. It is a world power. There's a huge Indian American diaspora, and those people they have high-paying jobs, they're well-educated, and they have a tremendous amount of influence.
How do you see Joe Biden and Donald Trump both wooing the Indian American vote? Because if you see Donald Trump, he managed to put up a great show with Narendra Modi, not only in India, but in Houston too. If you look at Kamala Harris as the vice presidential nominee, she herself is somebody who comes from an Indian lineage. How do you view both of them wooing the Indian American vote?
I think they both went after that vote hard. Probably Biden and Harris more overtly, we're one of you, we can. But, Trump obviously played up his relationship with Narendra Modi. He did that event in Houston for a reason. And I think Prime Minister Modi knows how to play Donald Trump and knows how to, work that relationship. Trump will say, look, Modi likes me. And that's something that would carry weight with a number of Indian American voters. So, look, it's a growing, influential voting bloc that's only going to get bigger and more powerful. And I think that works to the benefit of India and to the United States in terms of, Indian-U.S. relations.
Right. And last but not least, of course, before I let you go, Ray, will New Delhi be able to sustain its ties with Washington, irrespective of who's in power, is one question that everybody here in India is asking. What's your take?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly with a Biden administration, with the vice president being half Indian American, I mean, that's a huge advantage. It stands to reason that that administration, and Joe Biden knows India well, and he's had relationships with people there, would be open to that. And President Trump would say, look, this country helped me. He's probably a little more transactional than most people. I think, India's needs and desires and thoughts would carry great weight with him as well.
Absolutely. It seems like there is not going to be much of a difference, whether it comes in policy or rhetoric. considering India has already managed to strike a valuable relationship with the United States. On that note, thank you so much, Raylok, for joining us here on this broadcast and sharing your very precious inputs. We thoroughly value it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.